Let's get started. All right, so first off, my name is Evan Doan. I'm a person in long-term recovery for both substance use disorder and mood disorder. My pronouns are he, him, and I am the Community Impact Director for the Utah Support Advocates for Recovery Awareness, or USARA.
Hello everybody, my name is Jules Martinez. I am a person in long-term recovery also from substance use disorder and mental health. I'm the clinical director at Latino Behavioral Health Services, and I've been hanging out with that group for a long time. And we're excited to present on de-escalation for everyone today. So how many folks have had an experience with a friend, a loved one, at work, where someone was maybe in a state of mind where you felt nervous, scared, they were agitated, maybe experiencing a different reality or something like that? How many? Raise your hands. Almost everybody, right? Yeah, this happens in our lives and it happens in our work a lot. And this is something our staff ask for a lot, so it's something we wanted to share with everyone.
And full disclosure, we have both individually given this training before, but we combined our trainings into one super training today. And so this is the first time that we're doing it together, but I think it's going to be the best.
We're running a bit behind and we're going to have to crunch this a little bit, but this is what we're hoping to cover today. How do you identify a crisis? How do you de-escalate a crisis? So we're talking about communication, verbal de-escalation, not anything physical. How to take care of yourself during and after, what to do if you can't de-escalate a crisis. And we're not going to talk about reporting this. I get back to it.
Oh, next slide. All right, so we all have our own natural way of how we manage conflict, right? Like, we've all been in conflicts throughout the course of our lives, so we kind of have a way that we do it. Oftentimes, it's learned from our family of origin, and so it's kind of unconscious. We have these like unconscious behaviors that we use when we're in a conflict situation. So it kind of comes automatically, but I feel like it comes up naturally. And they're all different, right? We all have different experiences, and so we all have different ways of managing conflict. I think that what we would like you to try to do is bring some awareness to what your own personal strategy typically tends to be when you find yourself in conflict. Do you get aggressive? Do you get passive? Do you get quiet? Do you get loud? It's just important to have some awareness around how you manage conflict typically, so that we can help you in implementing the skills to de-escalate a crisis. Cool. So some of the vulnerability factors that can lead to someone getting into a crisis state or feeling agitated are previous mental health episodes or mental health issues, having physical health problems or pain, any sort of substance use can often contribute to these situations, past experiences of trauma or violence in someone's life, prior episodes of aggression or aggressive behavior, other life stressors, and then just the kind of feelings that we have. Sometimes our feelings get really big, right? So feelings of powerlessness or fear or grief or injustice or humiliation or frustration, those can all be triggers for people to escalate them into a crisis kind of level. I want to point out on this slide that these things generally, in the world in which all of us work as peers, a lot of the people we're serving have these things going on all the time, right? So it's often, it makes a lot of sense that we would encounter crisis level situations quite a bit in our work. And it's not anything that person's doing wrong or badly. It's the natural consequence of what's happening because of what's going on with these vulnerability factors in their life.
Yeah, just that we want to be aware of these things also, because that's going to help us solve problems and understand that person and meet them where they're at as much as we can. To know that it's not just this person coming at you, but there's a whole bunch of stuff behind that we need to take that careful around. So how do we identify a crisis? You guys probably already know this, right? What are some signs? What are some signals that you all notice? Shout them out loud. Crying. Yeah, that's a good one. Threats.
Are you yelling?
Yelling area. Hysteria? What do you mean by that?
Just like extremely elevated anger or being upset.
Really strong emotions. Yeah.
Body language.
Body language is huge. Early cues if someone's getting tense or big, those are good signs.
If they're quiet, but you can tell they're ready to
Yeah, sometimes people go inward before an explosion. Yep.
facial expressions.
Yes, facial expressions for sure. So they'll tell you.
Yeah.
Yeah, they'll tell you I'm really angry or I'm really upset. Definitely. Yeah, you guys already, I think, all know this, and that's probably why you're in this room. You're like, how do I do this? So I don't want to spend too much time on this piece. We can all see those signs early, and I want to cover this right here. We might come back to it at the end. We're talking about how to de-escalate a crisis, how to help somebody feel more safe, more heard, so that they are more safe and you're more safe, and you can kind of move forward without needing to do some kind of higher level intervention. And sometimes that's not possible, and so there might be times when someone is really threatening you. Perhaps they have a weapon, or they're threatening to hurt themselves, or something really serious that you might need to get other people involved. Kind of my first go-to in the community I work with, in the Latino community, I'm really trying not to call the police. So if I can, if it feels safe enough, the first thing I want to do is call that person's emergency contact to get their family involved, or their best friend, or whoever they feel close to and safe with, involved in that moment to kind of help support them, that they're going to feel safer with that person than they would with me, or the MCOT team, or 911. But there are times when that can't happen, or it can't happen quickly, and I might need to call MCOT to come down. I know that's not available in every part of the state. And there are sometimes when we might just need to call 911 when there is a real physical threat and someone's going to get hurt. I don't want to shy away from that if we need to keep people safe.
All right, so what is de-escalation? Here's the dictionary definition. So it's the reduction of the intensity of a conflict or potentially violent situation. So in any conflict that's happening in our life, we always have a choice of what we do. Every action that we take, we're going to be either further escalating the situation, or we're going to be de-escalating the situation. And so we have a choice. What do we want to do? Do we want to help kind of bring things down, or we can ramp things up? And so oftentimes I think about this through the lens of, will my actions in this situation bring me emotionally closer to that person or further away, right? Am I distancing myself, emotionally from that person, or am I trying to really connect with them, right? Because if I'm really trying to connect with them, that's going to be a natural way to kind of de-escalate the crisis. All right, so 3 major components of communication. You can see this very unscientific chart on the bottom, but it's there to demonstrate that we all are constantly communicating with each other all the time, not just through our words, not just through our verbal communication. Our verbal communication matters, and it's one component of that. It's actually the smallest piece of that pie, right? We also have nonverbal communication, like we'll get into what each of these mean in a minute, but like our body language. We also have paraverbal communication, which is like how we say something. So the tone, the pitch, those kinds of things.
So when talking about nonverbal communication, we're talking about body language, as Evan said. So we have some kind of do's and don'ts in here, and I put some cute pictures in here to exemplify them. But we wanna let people know that we're with them, we're hearing them, and we're not only doing that through our words, but we're mostly doing it through our body language. If Evan is trying to tell me about why he's upset and I'm over here like this, Evan's going to be more upset, right? If I'm not really listening with my full body, I'm there with Evan, it's not going to help things. Also, the same descriptors that you gave of how we know someone is in crisis, we're also giving information through our facial expressions, our body language. If we look freaked out, or if we're about to cry, another person is going to pick up on that. So we're trying to maintain a neutral facial expression. And not, as much as I love eye contact, it's hard for me. I'm trying not to stare into their eyes. Because in animal sense, that's very threatening to people. Cats are predators, they just do that all day long. They just give you the rooster, owls too. I put a bunch of examples of that on there. And we want our hands to be, our body to be relaxed, our hands to be in a place where they can see them, they're not clenched, they're not in our pockets, because what if we have something in our pockets? They don't, that other person doesn't know that. And if someone is on the ground or something like that, we want to kind of get down with them and talk to them where they're at instead of talking down to them. Also, it's kind of weird if I'm sitting in a chair and talking to somebody who's in my face. I do want to try to get at the same level. As Evan mentioned, we're trying to create connections with that person to help them feel heard and see. So we don't want to be multitasking. We don't want to have our arms crossed. That one's hard to do too. We don't want to be pointing at them. You should do this. Or staring in their face. And we want to move slowly and calmly.
There's also in nonverbal communication the amount of space that we give a person, right? And so we want to give that person who's experiencing the crisis plenty of space, right? Usually we recommend about 2 arm lengths away for a very practical reason, which is what? Safety, right? And then I oftentimes, when somebody's agitated, will kind of casually put an obstacle between us, right? Like, so let's say this chair was just here, like I would kind of like walk into this direction, right? Because then there's a physical obstacle that Jules would have to overcome before Jules could hurt me, right? So again, another safety tip. We want to also limit the chaos in the environment. So when there's other staff present, like oftentimes that like having an audience there can further escalate a person, can make them feel even more uncomfortable, more anxious. And so making sure that the unnecessary staff is kind of ushered away. There's not a lot of chaos or distraction happening, not a lot of loud sounds or sudden sounds happening in the environment, and limiting the number of people present. What we don't want to do is we don't want to block any exits for that person, so you don't want to put yourself between that person and the door to the room, because if they want to go, you should just let them go. You don't want to turn your back on that person. You don't want to touch them without getting their permission, right? Because when we're in that state where we're feeling escalated, oftentimes we're very, very sensitive to being touched. And we don't want to take like challenging postures or positions, like, you know, like putting your hands on your hips or like that kind of thing, right? So giving people plenty of space to operate in. Jules has a really good point that they bring up around this and cultural sensitivity.
Yeah, I think that their body language is very much culturally embedded. For white folks, 6 feet, this feels like a healthy distance to be talking to Evan. But for folks who live in more populated countries, like a lot of parts of Asia, like standing this close is very normal. But for me, I'm like, whoa, we just need a little bit of space. And physical touch too is very cultural, you know. Where I work at Latino behavioral, everybody always wants to be to say hi. And you know, in a crisis situation, that could be a comforting gesture, especially from a female, an older female. That could be something that might just like help bring them down automatically. So there's a lot of cultural nuance around physical body language and distance.
Awesome, super important. Sure. So the paraverbal forms of communication are how we say something. So that's something like the tone of voice that we use, or, and so let's practice this, right? So like, let's say this phrase here at the bottom, we made it here on time, and I want someone first to say it suspiciously. Just anyone.
We made it here on time.
Oh, great, right? Okay, now say it, someone say it happily.
You made it here on time.
Awesome. Patronizing.
Oh, you made it on time.
Nice. Irritable.
Oh, you made it here on time.
So what we say, how we say it really matters, right? It changes the meaning of what we're saying by how we say it. So we don't really watch our tone and be aware of what our tone tends to be in those kinds of situations, right? So I know that me as a person, that one of my defenses is that oftentimes I can unconsciously be very patronizing to people. It's not my intention, it's just how I come across. And so I have to really watch my voice to make sure that I'm not doing that to people, not sounding patronizing, not sounding suspicious or tacky. I want to kind of maintain a friendly, communicative tone.
Yeah, just to add on to that, I think taking a stance of not non-judgmental attitude is really important. Because I think inherently people pick up on your tone. The way our paraverbal communication is very self-conscious. If I'm irritated, it just comes out in my tone. If I'm happy, it comes out in my tone. If I'm angry, right? And so I think practicing that attitude of non-judgment is going to be the thing that helps us manage our tone the most. If we can really truly see that person as a person and not be judging them and just not faking it, because people pretty much always see through it. So it's really important to practice that attitude of non-judgment to be able to get these non-verbal and paraverbal pieces out.
Some other things that can kind of impact our paraverbal communication are the volume, so how loud we're being. So if you're excessively loud or super, super quiet, that has a different meaning in our culture, right? Also the rate at which you say something, either very fast or very slow, and the politeness, like how respectful we are in communicating those words. So let's hear someone say, it's time to go, really loud.
It's time to go!
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
And really quiet. Perfect. Someone say it quickly. Great. Someone say it slowly. Right, so again, the meaning changes depending on how we communicate it. So we want to use a very steady volume, so not loud or overpowering, but loud enough that person can clearly hear us. We want to keep our rate kind of slow and rhythmic, so it's soothing, controlled and calm. And then try to be polite, so not calling people names or using profanity, saying please and thank you, if it's appropriate, sir or ma'am, depending on culture, those kinds of things. And then at that little point in the bottom right-hand corner, allow for silence when silence is needed too, right? So I know that comes up a lot in our work, when how we deal with silence, and we all kind of have a way that we do that, but just allowing for that to exist and what's happening with us and that other person, and allow for those moments of silence, it's really important.
And that's really hard when we're anxious or worried or feeling afraid, but sometimes that can be enough to diffuse the situation to just give it some space. My favorite. So the verbal, what we actually say, we say active listening, but how we let somebody know that we're actively listening, how they understand that we heard them, is a huge piece of our verbal communication. So we're going to reflect that understanding back. How many of you have taken like MI, a little bit of MI? That kind of thing, right? It's super helpful in these situations. That we can do a simple reflection. If a person tells us something, we can just parrot that right back to them. All of that paraverbal stuff and nonverbal stuff that Evan was talking about, that person is probably going to feel hurt. That we're going to emphasize to that person, with that person's feelings. We might not be able to validate their experience of reality or the choices that they want to make in that moment, but we can pretty much always empathize with how they might be feeling. And that's the piece that we can connect with them on. So we definitely don't want to, if someone is maybe in a different state of reality than we are, we don't want to validate that untruth, because that could be escalating for them as well, especially if it's a scary experience that they're having. But we also don't want to argue with them about it, because that's definitely going to get them agitated. And we want to kind of try and figure out what it is that they want and need and help them with that as much as we can. So again, we're going to validate and focus on the feelings and use open-ended questions. So we have some little examples right here. So if someone is really agitated and they say to you, you know, you people are always conspiring against me, you probably feel like that's true, right? How are you going to validate that feeling? Does anyone want to share, you know, with the paraverbal and everything, what you might say?
I understand that you feel that we're conspiring against you.
Yeah, that's a simple reflection. Nice, even tone. Any other thoughts on that? Okay, sorry for going that way. Do you want to explain why? Yeah, with the open-ended question. Nice. Yeah, so she said, for those folks online, she said, sorry you're feeling that way. Do you want to explain why, or can you explain why do you feel that You might say, you can't trust me. You've had some bad experiences in the past, and I hear you. You can't trust me right now. Who else would you trust more? Because there's a lot of ways to go with this.
So I always try to present myself as somebody who is on their side, working towards a common solution. Actually, Brayden and I mentioned this in our training earlier today, our workshop earlier today, but it's not me versus you, it's us and you, me and you against the problem, right? So it's not me against you, it's me and you against the problem. So I often try to present myself as an ally in working to address the problem together. So like, hey, how can we figure this out together, right? Like, or how can we come to a resolution that suits all of us? You know, and so helping that person really understand that I'm there to help them. I always try to ignore personal attacks when someone's really escalated, when someone's really aggravated. It's not uncommon for them to make little personal swipes at you. I just don't engage with those, right? So I just don't respond to them. I don't let them get under my skin. That person's trying to help me because they're trying to get me escalated, right? And so it's important that we just kind of ignore those the best we can. Also important to restate common goals. Like, we both want you to have a good time here in this experience, or we all want to see you do well. It's important to realize that people that are agitated and are in crisis, they don't care about rules, right? They care about getting their symptoms relieved right now, right? And so we really want to focus the conversation on getting them de-escalated first, and then we can figure out the rest of the behavioral stuff later, right? The first pass is getting them down to earth so they can actually reason. When someone's super escalated, when they're super agitated, they don't have the mental capacity to get into their brain space where they can actually access problem solving or rule following, right? They're just kind of out of that mind. And so we want to recognize that they don't care about what the rules are, they just want to get some relief. And then also if you need to, calmly offer options and explanations about rules and limits if it's needed, right? So you might need to explain like this rule exists because it keeps us all safe, right? Or present some options like we can either go talk in the hall or we can go talk outside, right? So it's kind of like, oftentimes we do that with little children, like we can have the broccoli or the zucchini, right? And so we're presenting two options, giving that person a choice, but there are two options that are acceptable to us. Yeah.
So I'm on the MCOT team in Roosevelt, and we was actually at a hospital setting where we was trying to talk to the person, and her husband was, boyfriend was there, and he was like, hey. So we asked her, should we ask him to leave? And so she had the choice. And when she said yes, then we had the authority to not him. And she calmed right down, and it was amazing.
That's a great example.
If we would have asked him to leave, she would have felt like we was taking her, I don't know, who knows what she was doing. But we asked her, can we ask him to leave?
Exactly. You got her on your side with what you wanted to do first.
And she knew at that point we was there for her.
Exactly. Great.
Yeah, you found a solution together.
Cool, next slide.
So through all of this, I think it's really important to take care of ourselves. These jobs are hard, especially when we're working in environments where there's a lot of crisis, like an MCOT team. We want to be prepared, and part of it is taking trainings like this and practicing, where you have those active listening skills, where you have a plan, your teammates know what's going on too. You know together, like, hey, if this kind of thing comes up, this is our plan together. So have a plan for yourself and think about it in your head. What am I going to do if a crisis comes up? Because if you think about that, you feel mentally prepared, it's going to be easier to enact in the moment. So lean on your coworkers in the moment. You can ask a coworker, hey, if you start hearing something, can you just hang close, like right outside the door, so you can come in if things get escalated, that kind of thing. You can talk about it with your coworkers afterwards. You can debrief and kind of process what happened, because this stuff is heavy. We need our own space to talk about. If we were threatened, it was scary. If we kind of had some transference or counter-transference in ourselves pretty hard. And these kind of situations don't always go well. If you did have to call the police, if somebody did get hurt, don't put that on yourself. Be positive with yourself and know that you did the best that you could, and given the resources that you had, and be easy on yourself. And know your own limits. If you do feel unsafe, pull your supervisor in. If you do need to call the police, there are those times you've got to recognize your limits and get help from somebody else in those situations.
And I think I would just also point out that these situations are like very challenging for all of us, right? We all work in this space because we care about the people we serve, and oftentimes it feels like we've not met that person's need in the situation, and so it's natural to kind of like feel like you didn't help them, right? But go easy on yourself, give yourself some grace, give yourself some permission to do what you need to do, and recognize that you're doing your best.
Yeah, I think that is.
Yeah, so we have plenty of time for questions, comments, concerns, anything you want to talk about. Yeah.
What tips do you have for when it needs to de-escalate your life soon? What's your video about? Like how much more different is it than in person?
Super different.
Yeah, I think like in a group Zoom setting or one-on-one.
One-on-one.
Yeah, I think it is a lot harder because you have a lot less control over the environment, and that person can get up and leave, or they might not be like looking at your face on the Zoom room, and so that can be challenging. But I think a lot of the same skills apply with active listening and reflecting back what that person is saying, and some of the paraverbal stuff is going to be really different because you have to find ways to communicate. You only have this much body language. So some of the ways that you might show that you're calm and caring with your body, you're not going to have as much impact in that way. Do you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, the other thing I would add too is just that, like, I think oftentimes when we're on Zoom with somebody, it's easy for us to get distracted by the things that are going on. So again, paying attention to that one about like keeping the focus on them, making sure that you're giving them your full attention, and you're not multitasking in that situation. But yeah, like Jules was saying, like those paraverbal skills, like how you come across, the tone, how you're kind of communicating with your facial body language and your upper body, makes me make a huge impact.
I think one other thing that could be helpful, I especially work with a lot of young folks, and sometimes it's hard to keep them engaged, especially if they get anxious or agitated and they shut down, they're distracting themselves or whatever. So if you can find, there's like some cool tools for online Zoom therapy, counseling kind of stuff that I think would work well for peers too, where you can get them drawing on a shared screen, or there's like a sandbox tray thing that might be like a soothing way to engage them, where you can get them to focus on something else. That's kind of going to depend though. That might not work if someone's very agitated. The other thing I want to ask that is if you do know that somebody else is with them or working with them, to say, hey, is anyone else around that you feel safe with, that can come be with you in person? That's all I got. I've never had to deal with that much.
So, I work with all adult men, and in the 9 months I've worked at this place, there's been 3 times where there's been like intense violence that I've been in the middle of to de-escalate. And that's why I wanted to come to this training, because as much training as I have sitting here in a safe place, when that kind of explodes, it's
Scary.
yeah, like I go into fight or flight. All of my trauma of violence comes straight up. And these are grown men, these are not children, even though they're behaving like that. And I mean, just any kind of input or suggestion you have around that. What I found is first things first, separate them. Get them away from each other. Yeah, like violence is so close at each other. First, yeah.
Yeah, I think I want to acknowledge that in that situation, it's also really important, like I said at the beginning, to like know your own conflict style. You mentioned some of that, right? Like knowing that you have a trauma history, knowing that like this stuff is going to be triggering for you, because then you have a sense of, oh, this is what I do when this comes up. And when that happens for me, oftentimes I can have some awareness around, oh yeah, this is like my pattern of how I do this, right? And I can kind of de-escalate myself a little bit first, right? And so first step is kind of getting you're down to be able to help. And if you can't do that, getting someone else who can, right? Because there are going to be times where maybe that's who it is or what the situation is, that I'm not going to be the person that can help in this situation because I'm so escalated, right? So getting that support from someone else that can, I think is hugely helpful.
I also think all of this, presentations are so stupid. Because, like, you get this information in, but what do you do with it? Like, you just put it in your notebook and then it's like you have to practice, especially with stuff that's hard like this. Like get somebody who you trust, who will get up in your face and, like, practice yelling at you and, like, you know, or having two people do that in front of you. Because that kind of exposure where you can practice in a safe space, on regulating yourself, but then also knowing how to respond to them and get feedback from them. Hey, I said this, I did this, I stood here, like, how did that feel? Legit, like, practice is way better than presentations.
And also, this is a good example where that debrief comes in handy too, right? Talking to someone afterwards and saying, hey, this is what came up for me in that situation, right? Just working through that with somebody can be so helpful. So that's a great question.
Yeah, we should practice.
We should practice, yeah. We had talked about doing some practice here in the group today, but because of the time limitation, it's going to be a little bit tough. But yeah, in a longer training, definitely would. Any other questions, comments, concerns? Awesome.